Okay, being 5:30, I'm going to call this February 8th meeting of the trustees of the Wellfleet Housing Authority to order. Um, This meeting is conducted via Zoom conferencing in accordance with the temporary suspension and enhancement to open meeting law requirements by Governor Baker. Instructions for the Zoom links are in the posted agenda on the town website. Meeting may be recorded by the town. Anybody else desiring to record the meeting may do so only after notifying the chair and may not interfere with the conduct of the meeting in so doing. So with that, we go to announcements. And since there's some stuff that's not on the agenda that I did, I'll just announce it. I spoke on and trying to run down the idea of supporting housing for families above the area median income, AMI. I spoke with the executive director of Nantucket Housing, which is not a housing trust, it's a nonprofit. On the 4th, she directed me to the chair of Nantucket's Affordable Housing Trust and their housing director, both of whom were busy doing a property acquisition and expect to be free after this Wednesday. So I'll follow that up. But she did tell me that Nantucket supports up to, I think, either 175% or 200% of AMI with its housing efforts. So perhaps I can learn what's going on there. I also talked to Ann, Ann, get them right here.
Ian Robinson.
Andrea at CDC.
Oh.
And I have a conference call scheduled with her tomorrow morning to follow up on that. I've also spoken with Heather Michaud, our town accountant. We'll talk about that during when we get to finances. And let's see, does that cover everything? And I also attended the Housing Authority meeting on the 4th. Okay, so that's it for announcements. First item is trust financial support of Wellfleet Housing Authority programs. And that kind of ties with also transfer of affordable housing trust assets to the trust and the question of trust budget and balances for the balance of the fiscal year. So I'm going to kind of roll those three things, hi Elaine, all together. And Elaine sent me, and I will see if I can pop it up here. Oh, come on. Here we go. So Elaine, did you send this out to everybody or just to me?
She's muted.
I just sent it to you, Harry. I'm not ever sure what the protocol is for a member of a committee to send out stuff to everybody.
I think you can send material around as long as you don't get together and discuss it.
Okay.
So here's a document we're going to talk about at the next meeting, everybody. Boom. That's okay. Getting together over coffee, at that point you start to get into serial deliberations, which is an open meeting law violation, but you can send stuff out. So at any rate,
I'll send it to everybody.
Okay, well, I'll pop it up right now anyway.
Harry, if I can interject on that just for quickly.
Sure.
You can send stuff out as long as it's informational and not opinion, or potentially convey your opinion based on the information that is sent out. So, but as long as you put FYI and send out the information, then that's different than sending us all anything with your opinion attached to it.
Yeah, this is an agenda document kind of thing is okay. So let's just take a quick look at that. So what Elaine is given me is a list of programs with some notes on, in some cases, what was voted. And I'm assuming, and correct me if I'm wrong, the Housing Authority operating budget, that $5,000, is that CPA funding or is that just a regular appropriation?
It's voted at town meeting. We have a line like all the other committees and departments.
Oh, okay, so that's not CPC money, okay.
No, the CPC money's down below where.
Right.
Yeah.
Yep. And then there's the current Affordable Housing Trust Fund. Current balance is an estimate. The Gull Pond housing, go ahead, Elaine.
It's an odd one. When Ted Malone was developing Gull Pond, we pledged over $200,000 from the trust for him to use. Gull Pond is all over, but there's still this line in the town accounting that says Gull Pond, $31,000. I think we suggested to Jean that it be deposited back into the trust fund, but I don't know that that has happened.
Okay, so maybe we should take a vote to request that. Let's sort of work our way through this thing first.
Harry, can I interrupt
Yes,
for 1
Gary.
second? I'm sorry. All of this is estimate figures, and the town is going through an audit right now. So we can make generic requests, but what actually is in that account hopefully will be identified in the audit process, and we can make a specific in terms of an amount on any of these, hopefully after the audit.
Yeah, and to update that, what Heather told me was that the auditors were due on site today. And she expected that by the end of March, their work would be done. And I gently suggested that the sooner we can resolve exactly where the housing money is and how much of it there is, the sooner we can consolidate everything in one place and begin to operate. So, so that's the status of the audit as I understand it. So, and then let's see, we talked about Gull Pond housing, rental income from 2082 State Highway. Do we get a net balance from the Orleans Housing Authority net after administrative costs, or how does that work?
Tim Bueller basically sends me all the bank statements for a year at the end of the year. So the balance right now is around $50,000. He has always encouraged us to keep at least $35,000 in that account to handle any repairs and necessary work on the cottage. He said the rest of it is for us to use however we want, and we have used some of it for rental assistance when our CPA grant was running out. That's the story with that one.
Okay, and the CDBG rental item, is that a leftover item, or is there a program underlying that, or?
Yeah, the rehab loan that people got over several different years, if they moved or sold their property before the loan was, it was a 15-year forgivable loan. If they moved before that, they had to pay back some of it.
Mhm.
Another time when our rental assistant funds were running low, we asked the select board for $25,000.
Mhm.
And we may have asked them again a second time, Gary, right? I'm not sure. But it's a kind of a confusing one too, in terms of where it should be.
So Harry. I'm
Yep.
sorry. Harry, there was, don't hold me to this figure, but there was approximately 75,000 in repaid CDBG for everybody. It's a Community Development Block Grant.
Yep.
There was about 75,000 in that account, and it was held by a third party by contract. And for whatever reason, they decided that the contract had changed and that they could go to the town. And I believe that the former town administrator then transferred that 75,000 into the general fund. But 25,000 of it we did manage to get for rental programs.
Okay. Again, probably it would be good to, with programs like that, to have as part of the expectation what happens to the money when it's repaid.
Right.
Well, that's an item for future. Let's see. And then we've got.
Could I add one other thing, Harry?
Sure.
We are currently paying that out at a rate of approximately $2,000 a month. So it should be essentially negligible or totally used by the time we get to transfer money.
This is the CDBG rental, right?
Correct.
Yeah.
Ideally, that money should go right into the trust now, because it
Yes.
could.
Elaine, that money couldn't go into the old trust.
Right, it couldn't go into the old trust, but it can go into the new trust.
Correct. Okay, so let's see here. So rental assistance. That's is that a CPC grant? The rental
Yeah,
assistance?
all the ones
Oh, okay.
after that are all CPA grant.
Okay. And emergency housing assistance. And we just won't know those balances until our audit's complete, right?
Well, in this case, we have a good sense of it because that was recently approved at the September town meeting and only transferred after that, I think, right around the beginning of October. And we have dispersed approximately $12,000 in emergency housing assistance. So we have a pretty good sense of the balance there.
Okay, so if I do the subtraction, 193 approximately. Is that right? Yeah. Okay, I'll tell you where I'm headed with this in a minute. Buy down program. Let's see.
That is future funding. It was approved at town meeting. I believe the money has been transferred to housing, or an account has been set up. That's an award that we anticipate making in the spring. But within that, it's 175,000 is the award, and approximately 10,000 of that program is for administrative charges. The bulk of that being to advertise to meet fair housing marketing requirements for the program, as well as for the administration of it, which will be billed at the time it's completed of about 3,000.
Okay, and CDP is managing that for the Housing Authority, right?
Right.
Well,
They're administering it.
Okay. And down payment and closing cost assistance?
Yeah, that was a grant, a CPA grant we got in 2018. We're just doing the last one. The closing is actually next week, and that will basically zero out that account. But we did authorize another $20,000 from our trust fund should another qualified applicant come forward.
Yep. And then the last two are the housing specialist. So there is a contract in place for this year, is that right?
Yes.
Okay. And the estate planning is just, is there anything happening with that, or is that just a kind of a leftover?
Well, it's something of a leftover, but we are, and we'll talk about this when we get to the minutes, but Sharon and others have been working on something called the Housing Angel program, and we've been thinking about producing a brochure, and we believe that that would fall under the umbrella of estate planning, and we could use that money to pay for the printing and possibly distribution of a brochure.
Okay, so what I did with what Elaine gave me, let me close this one and let me make this a little bit larger. There. So I took that and I tried to recast it as sort of a very vague, admittedly, budget for the balance of fiscal 2021, and as a kind of working draft for a budget for fiscal 2022. And so I've taken this, let's see, state highway, and I think Elaine said that we should keep $35,000 in there. And so what I was kind of, geez, there's spelling errors all throughout this. This is terrible. APPROP. So what I was thinking about suggesting to us is that we take these things. Let me see. I guess we go down the 2082 State Highway. So we have to maintain a balance there, and the rental assistance balance. Now you said on that let me see, where do I go? Let me find it in my notes. Is that did I understand that's been exhausted for this year? The
No.
rental?
No.
No? So that's still there.
Right, and as Gary was giving you sort of what we've expended for emergency housing,
Yep.
I guess we could say with the rental assistance since July, right, when we would have been awarded this, is it about $2,400 a month we're spending, Gary?
Very good.
So
It obviously changes based upon the number of people who apply for and are approved for assistance. But if we said $2,500 a month, it
Yeah.
should cover.
So for 6 months, if we subtract that.
Okay. That's the rental assistance, right?
Mhm.
And then the emergency housing assistance, we have, let's see.
Spent 12,000.
So what we really have is an estimated, I apologize for my typing skill, balance of okay, so we've got, yeah, we need another zero there, sorry. So we have an estimated balance there of about 193,000. And that is in the Affordable Housing Trust? Or is that
You
a
know,
separate?
in past years, CPA grants have, for the most part, if they had anything to do with rental assistance, had to stay in a CPA line by itself because
Mhm.
our old trust didn't allow that.
Okay.
And any trust money, any CPA money that goes into a trust does have to be separately accounted for.
Yep,
So, but with our new trust, all of these could go in,
mhm,
but they still would have to be tracked, you know,
right.
for CPA reporting.
Harry, I
Yes.
have a general question for you and or the committee. So for both 2 and 3, rental assistance and emergency housing,
Yep,
those are programs that are administered by the housing authority, either directly or through a third party,
yep,
and don't exist today in the trust because the trust doesn't allow for support, which is why, one of the reasons why we changed trusts.
right.
So those are town accounts effectively.
Mhm.
And they change periodically every month or two, depending upon the nature of the requests.
Mhm.
Is it better for that to go to the trust or to stay in a town account administered by the housing authority?
My preference, again, not having given it a whole lot of thought, would be to try and collect all of that in one place so we have a clear picture of exactly what we're, you know, what we're doing to support housing as opposed to sort of a balkanized thing where, you know, different pieces are cubbyholed in different places.
I don't have any problem with that. I just wonder how then would it work if this is a program that is dynamic, it changes every month
Mm-hmm.
approximately, and that is administered by the housing authority. Would we then vote to pay X, $2,500 a month in rental assistance, and then go to the trust for approval?
What I was thinking about is that we would budget an amount, say for the rental assistance, if the balance is $185,000, that would be the budget amount that the housing authority could draw against, just like any department can draw against its appropriation. And when I get down to the bottom of this page, hopefully that's where I end up. So I'll have a proposal for you guys to discuss. So what I've tried to do is I've tried to capture what Elaine did and put the programs on top. So, you know, for example, down housing specialist, estate planning support. And the last one was the $5,000 for housing authority administrative services. And then I took let's see, I took what I could extract out of that as sources of revenue. And I've now been told that this is not CPC money here, this $5,000. So we have the administrative support from the town. We have CPA funding proposed for FY 2022. We have the current Affordable Housing Trust Fund, current balance of $170,000. We've got some rental income from State Highway. We've got some donations, and we've got balances in other town. So that's what I've been able to understand as far as housing income. I probably shouldn't say housing authority. And then buried up in this thing is what I know about balances. So I kind of thought that maybe we could consider voting that we will, another spelling error, that the trust should commit to, subject to getting the funds transferred into the Affordable Housing Trust, that we should commit to continuing to support the Housing Authority programs that we've identified to the same extent that they are presently supported, just as sort of an interim bridge for the last now 5 months of this fiscal year, February through June. And as a second thought, that we use this as sort of like a kind of a first draft or a working copy of a budget for next year, understanding that we'll refine it and there may be programs that are added, and maybe we have to provide some financial support for 95 Lawrence Road and some other things. But just as a place to kind of get started with putting together a budget for next year. And then the third thing is perhaps to specifically request that the town, as soon as the audit is complete, transfer the existing housing funds to this trust. And so that's kind of what I thought, at least as a subject for discussion. So I would invite comments.
I'm glad to see you put the programs first, because, you know, I was trying to give everybody an idea of what we've been doing, but I was doing it from the financial part. So I like how you changed it to list it so you get an idea of, aside from our advocating for the ADUs, this is what we've been doing.
Just for simplification, all the donations go into the trust, so there really isn't anything as a separate line item donation. So you could eliminate that, and those just go. The trust includes all donations.
Right, but at some point when we have to account for what we've done for the year, we'll need to identify
which money came from.
Identify those, at least maybe in total rather than itemizing them. But so it's not income in the sense that it's income you can budget that you're always going to get, but it still will be, it'll still show up on our balance sheet somewhere. So those were my thoughts on financial support for Wellfleet Housing Authority, allocation of new housing donations to the trust, transfer of affordable housing assets to the trust, and trust budget. So I've kind of rolled those four things into one discussion.
Can I ask a question?
Absolutely.
Is there a place in the budget for kind of aspirational ideas? Like, we had some conversations in the housing authority and about, maybe we need to be looking at purchasing land because land is so hard to come by, for example. So that would be an aspirational kind of expenditure that isn't present in the budget at this point.
Right.
Harry?
Yep.
Would that be something that would be sort of a proposal to this trust to take up something like that and actually create it, rather than a sort of aspirational line item in the chart of accounts? But if that idea were to come forward to the trust and come to a vote, that we could raise money for that particular line item or that particular program.
Yeah, I kind of see that as transactional in the sense that without knowing what's out there, without identifying a specific opportunity, we don't know how much to budget. So I kind of, if it was a line item in a budget, I probably wouldn't put any money against it, with the understanding that as opportunities were identified, we'd make a decision to fund them or not fund them based on how attractive the opportunity was.
The only thing I kind of think about is that some of the opportunities that may arise might need quick action.
Right. I think we can still do that. I'm not
Okay.
suggesting that once we adopt a budget, we are stuck with that budget for better or worse.
Okay, I'm terrible at budgets, so,
Yeah,
I'm just like,
I kind of look at budgets as more an operating plan for the organization
uh-huh.
rather than something that the accountant can sink his or her teeth into for better or worse.
Okay.
Other, I mean, do you guys think that this is an appropriate approach, or do we want to, what do we want to do? Something different?
It seems appropriate to me. So will there be a sort of general fund that's not allocated into this budget that holds the balances, but operates as sort of free cash if there's donations that are made and we're allocated funding that's the money that's not budgeted that happens to be coming in?
Mm-hmm.
Will there be a sort of general fund inside the trust that?
Yeah, we would have, yeah, I kind of dealt with that in just one sentence here when I just said current account.
Oh, yeah, okay.
See above.
Yeah.
But yeah, you have, the trust assets would include whatever balances are unencumbered by support for existing programs, and we'd be free to support a different program at any time. We're not stuck with the once a year adopt a budget like towns' normal operations.
Sure.
So we
I guess
have
I
the-
just,
yeah.
I guess I just meant current account balances would be like the total balances of all our accounts
Yeah,
that are budgeted. I'm just wondering if a separate line for sort of like unbudgeted, I guess that would just be, never mind. I see now how it would be drawn out.
so this I think is really kind of the asset line of the balance sheet is kind of the way I
Right.
look at it.
It would show all funds allocated
Yep.
but into the budget together, but will there be a line item that sort of shows the funding that's unallocated towards our budget? So that there's a certain amount of funding that could be drawn from that's not already budgeted. I guess that's what I'm.
Right.
Yeah.
So say, for example, we have, there's about $190,000 estimated in the current, $170,000 estimated in the current Affordable Housing Trust. If that's not encumbered by supporting a program, that would be available to us to support a new initiative, whatever it is.
Right.
And if we needed to fundraise on top of that, we could do so.
One caveat, now I put on my CPC hat, if the CPA approves and the town meeting approves the use of CPA funds for a particular purpose, they're not actually fungible. So the balance cannot just go into the housing trust, but either has to be spent for that purpose or returned. So it's not as if, there is some stovepiping that goes on with the funds.
Yeah, no, that's very clear, and it's and in fact, the statute that created the trust specifically says that when you get CPA funds, you have to account for them based on the award you got and based on the limitations on how they can be used. So, yeah, we don't end up after this exercise with one bucket of money that has $300,000 of it in it, and that's the piggy bank. We still have line items that are restricted by, in some cases, by their source of funding. So the CPC grants in particular would have to be treated that way and accounted for that way. I agree.
it seems like, Harry, your first motion, I think it makes total sense for the rest of this fiscal year to do
Mhm.
that.
Yep.
Yeah, and I think for the next fiscal year, it would be nice to open it up more,
Yeah, I was thinking of for the next fiscal year is that's really just kind of a working draft. I wasn't proposing that would be a final budget that we would live or die with.
Mhm.
Did I say that? Yeah.
I think it was implied.
As a draft budget is what I said. Okay, we're not in any particular rush to do the second item anyway. And as far as the first item goes, we technically don't have to do anything until we're on the cusp of getting funds transferred into the trust anyway. So I don't think either one of these is has to be done today situation. I'm just kind of trying to work my way through organizing this in a way that I can understand.
Mhm.
And hopefully everyone else will be able to understand it too.
Yeah. Well, I personally don't see a reason why we shouldn't vote on this. Maybe there is. Does anybody have reservations on voting on the motion?
I
On the
defer to
first-
Gary and Elaine on that.
The motion that you're talking about is the first one?
The
First
first one.
Yeah.
Let me
Yeah.
disappear the other one there. How's that?
I think that makes a lot of sense just to do it, that one right now.
Yeah.
And that subsumes everything above it on this piece of paper.
Mhm.
Yep. So I'll make a motion. I move that, subject to the transfer of the balance of funds held by the current Affordable Housing Trust, the trust providing funding necessary to support existing Wellfleet Housing Authority programs identified above for the balance of fiscal year 2021.
Is there a second?
Second.
Is that Sharon?
Yep.
This is going to turn into minutes when I'm done. Any more discussion?
So Harry, just so I understand it correctly.
Yep.
This is for the transfer of the money in the old housing trust? Or is this transfer for all housing related funds?
This would be our commitment to support what the Housing Authority is presently doing.
Right.
And,
I'm
and
talking about the
conditioned
transfer of
on-
money.
it would be conditioned on enough funds being transferred to us to be able to do that, which principally would be the old Housing Authority funds. But to the extent we can identify and get these other accounts that are hanging around transferred, I'd do that too.
But I don't see that in this motion. That's what I'm.
No, it doesn't, it's not in this motion.
Okay, so this motion is specific to the transfer of the funds in the existing housing trust
Correct.
to the new trust.
Yeah.
Okay.
Guys ready for the question, or is there more we need to noodle about?
Okay.
I guess I just have one question about allocated funds that have not been withdrawn from the account yet. That we're sure that, they'll be funded from this, wherever. Is this moving them into the new account, or is it just giving us responsibility of an account?
Okay, the only thing I specifically spoke to in this one is the current Affordable Housing Trust Fund. But I think I'd like to consider any of the other, and we don't have to do that today, any of the other accounts that are held by the town, such as the emergency housing assistance and the rental assistance accounts.
Harry,
Yep, go ahead.
an easy one that would, I think, help to resolve an outstanding item is the Go Pond money.
Yep,
Elaine, that money is not CPA in origin. but
Yep.
trust in origin from donation.
It's right. I mean, there were times when we asked for $100,000 to be transferred into the trust for no specific purpose, just for whatever purpose. Some of that, maybe that. Just like the 500,000 we're asking for in the spring, it's for no specific purpose. It's to be used by the trust however we need to. So the Gold Pond funds weren't separately identified for Gold Pond.
They're
I mean,
not program-specific CPA funds.
Right.
So Harry, if you wanted to maybe take another bite of the apple to consider,
Yep.
would
Go
be
ahead.
to move the Gold Pond money into the new trust as well.
Mm-hmm.
So that money is not going to change. It's not that all those outlays have been made. And if Elaine's understanding is correct, that it's not CPA specific money, program specific money. So it could be moved generally into the new trust. And that would eliminate one of those outstanding line items.
Okay, maybe we can do that as a second motion right after
Oh,
we
sure.
do.
I'm just saying a way to.
Other concerns? No, okay, I guess we're ready to vote on this one. That subject to the transfer of the balance of funds held by the current Affordable Housing Trust, the trust provide funding necessary to support existing Wellfleet Housing Authority programs identified above for the balance of fiscal 2021. Moved and seconded. Roll call vote. Mike,
Aye.
Elaine,
Aye.
Karen,
Sharon, aye.
Aye.
Yeah. Sharon, I. Okay. Kathleen,
Aye.
I'm sorry.
No worries.
Jim,
Aye.
and Gary,
Aye.
and the chair votes aye. Okay, and in line with Gary's comment, let's defer the budget one. And the trust, how about we change that instead? UEST. Let's see. So here's a possible motion to transfer the remaining Gold Pond project funds. How's that look?
Fine.
It's fine to me.
Yep. So moved.
Okay, so that's Elaine. Is there a second?
Second?
Mike? Discussion? Okay, we'll do a roll call vote again. Mike,
Aye.
Elaine,
Aye.
Kathleen,
Aye.
Sharon,
Aye.
Jim,
Aye.
Gary,
Aye.
chair votes aye. So that's 7-0. Do we
Okay.
want to also specifically request at this time transfer of the old housing authority funds, or shall we wait until that audit is complete?
Let's wait, Harry.
Okay. Okay. Does anybody have anything else they would like to talk about in terms of financial support for the housing authority, allocation of new housing donations to the trust, transfer of affordable housing trust assets to the trust, and trust budget?
I did see in the Cape Cod Chronicle that Harwich CPA has upped their support for the Affordable Housing Trust from $800,000 to $1 million this year. And I think, we're looking at a situation that's really serious, and I'm glad we requested 500,000, but I think next year, we have to look at more.
Yep.
What, are there possibilities in terms of short-term rental tax? Or I know some towns are really going after transfer tax. Maybe this isn't the time to talk about it, but,
Actually,
I-
that's the next item on the agenda.
ah,
So if
Good
we're ready
segue.
to, Gary asked me, I think it was Gary asked me to put on the agenda, um, trying to earmark some or all of the short-term rental tax receipts to support housing. You want to talk about that, Gary, or?
Sure, just that other towns are doing that. I believe P-Town does it currently. And it's obviously part of the source of the difficulty of availability of affordable rentals and ownership is the quote unquote Airbnb effect. So it makes some sense in terms of addressing the problem by having that tax go towards supporting affordable housing. So it's both other towns are doing it, and I would argue functionally there's a linkage.
Okay, are they transferring all of the rental tax or a portion of it? Do you know what the exact?
Don't hold me to this, Harry, but I believe it's a portion of it.
Mhm.
So, so Harry, through you.
Yep.
So this is something that I've been advocating for since I ran to get on the board. I think it makes sense. I would sort of caution against trying to earmark the entire thing. I think some of that, or to pigeonhole it too much into a specific use. But certainly, I think a majority of this should be going into supporting housing. But maybe I would like the language to be like housing and infrastructure related to housing. That being like potentially like using some for water system upgrades or something like that in the future that may facilitate housing programs, or
Wastewater.
when there's nitrogen reduction septic systems that are more readily available, I think that would also change the nitrogen loading requirements that a typical septic system puts out, which would also potentially allow for more possibilities as far as housing opportunities. So I guess I would caution against asking to do the whole thing just to support housing, but maybe housing and housing related infrastructure. Something like that where it could be sort of a little bit open to be used in that respect.
could you say housing, sewer, or sewer/septic and water?
Yeah, so there are a bunch of things that go into wastewater treatment is a second one.
Mhm.
Arguably, I think transportation and education are also sort of peripherally related to housing too. I would have been cautious about this if I were still the town administrator, only because earmarks take away flexibility to react. So I think that I think we'd have to build a case, and I think the good starting point is the fact that a good part of our housing problem is the lack of rentals, and that's caused by the vacation rental industry. I mean, I remember, and I'm giving away my age, but when I first started practicing law down here in 1975, it was pretty common to be able to find a winter rental And that at least reduced your housing problems to 3 months out of the year instead of 12 months.
It's
But
still
I
not a very
suspect-
stable situation.
No, it's not, but those have completely disappeared.
Yeah.
You know, they've been non-existent for probably for 30 years. Just because landlords don't want to risk not being able to get the winter tenant out. The summer rentals are more profitable than the winter rentals ever were. So yeah, Gary's absolutely right that this is an effect of the short-term rental, the financial attractiveness of short-term rentals to property owners.
I would say it's the primary driver of the housing crisis.
Mm-hmm.
The other piece of that, that I know some towns in Massachusetts, well, Nantucket for one, but I think there's something else on the mainland that have a piece of home rule legislation that they're working on for transfer tax on homes over a certain value. And that money is earmarked directly for housing issues. So, because that's the other piece of the puzzle.
I think
Yep.
that was something we voted at town meeting years ago that went to Sarah Peak and hasn't gone anywhere.
No, I know, but I think that there's a little more, there might be more possible traction now that other towns are also advocating for it.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, I think it's worth, taking another look at.
I think here I have I'll look for this, but I believe I have the total amount of receipts that Wellfleet received in short-term rental tax this season up until October. Let me try and figure that out, and
Mm-hmm.
I'll let you know what that number is.
Mm-hmm.
But it's substantial. It's well over 400,000 this summer in receipts.
We had,
This,
anecdotally, we heard a number of 500,000, Michael, so that's consistent.
Yeah,
and if that's a representative number, since this was not a real typical summer.
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I don't know. It wasn't typical, but actually it was a very highly booked short-term rental season.
Yeah,
I don't know. It wasn't any slower is what I've heard from.
Kathleen might have a read on that.
It wasn't any slower, and rentals are already off the charts for this season.
Uh-huh.
I have a question when we're talking about not pigeonholing where the monies will be used. Are we then saying, are we just going to leave it up to the town, and then as a housing trust, we will ask for them versus having a certain amount each year allotted towards us? When you said you would be hesitant as the TA, Harry, what,
Well,
can you expand on that?
my hesitation would have been, and I'm not in that position anymore, would have been based on the fact that the more earmarks you have, the less flexibility you have to meet whatever the town's budgetary needs are, because the less unearmarked money you have available to distribute in all the places where there isn't earmarked money. So it's a flexibility issue, and this is a tried and true technique. When you get federal highway money, it's for highways. When you get fisheries money, it's for fisheries. There isn't a whole lot of unconditioned block grants out there. So it's not. I'm not saying that it's an illegitimate way to look at it. I'm just saying that would have been one of my concerns, because it would have made it just that much more difficult to do any budget planning.
And what do you think as chair of this trust?
Put your other hat on, Harry.
That maybe it's an issue that I don't want to speak about too much. Uh,
My feeling would be that we should, before everybody tries to get a piece of it,
Mhm.
starts to spend it on other things, we should make our case and try to see that at least a portion of it goes to affordable housing.
Right, I support what Kathleen says.
I agree.
Because we always have needs in the town.
Yeah.
But if we don't have an identifiable stream of revenue, it's going to be very hard for
Mhm.
us to fund other than on a case-by-case basis. This one is really directly tied to the problem. So
Yes.
the
And-
tax
and I-
itself,
The
I
other
think it's
thing,
also- I'm sorry, go ahead.
the other thing I was just gonna say is that this is a new source of revenue. So it's not a source of revenue the town has been relying on for several years.
Mhm.
And so the fact that it's a new source of revenue that's directly, that has a direct consequence on our housing crisis, which we should refer to it as a crisis, because it really is at this point a housing crisis. Because it's the driver of that short-term rentals are, and because this is a new revenue stream, I think it's appropriate to make this request sooner than later, that this funding get allocated, and whether it gets allocated just to this trust, and that's enough, and the trust can do as it sees fit with it. I don't know, or if it should be earmarked specifically in this trust to support, like if it just came to the trust, then the trust could decide what to do with the funding without any stipulations, as long as it met the criteria of what the trust supports. So I think I would lean towards that, and I think I would probably, as a gesture, is not request the entire amount, but a substantial percentage of it. That way some money's still going into the general fund. But the majority of it would be going to support the problem, which is created by the source of the tax revenue.
Yeah, and I would also note and agree that, this is not it's not a short-term problem. This is not something that we fix this year or this year and next year and it's all fixed. This is, housing is going to be a long-term, perhaps never completely solved problem. So it's fair to look at a revenue stream and say, basically that the commitment should be made and should be permanent, as
All right.
opposed to this year, having to make the request every budget cycle.
I agree.
Who decides where the money gets spent? The select board?
If we went
Um,
into this, so the select board would probably go to town meeting because it's an allocation of funds, right, Ari?
Yep,
So.
So it's not a negotiation where if we ask for the whole thing, whoever's deeming it could say, we won't give you the whole thing, but we'll give you half. And that we penalize ourselves if we say we're asking for half, they might go down further. Because if we go to town meeting, whatever we ask for will likely be voted as we ask.
Well,
it is a political process in the sense that, you have to frame your request so you have the best possible chance of getting as much of it approved as you want. And so I guess the question is, what should we do to build a compelling case for this? How do we go about doing that?
I think we need to make it clear that housing has to be a very high priority.
I feel like it's not a difficult case to make to the town.
Right, but we still have to make it.
We still have to make it, but I guess, the request would come from this trust to the select board.
Mhm.
And then I think we would want to show what other towns are doing, I guess,
Yep,
where we're not the only ones.
Mhm.
lay out the problems that we're facing as far as rental availability, median house costs, and area median income.
Mhm.
um, to establish that we need a revenue stream that's going to carry on in perpetuity and be based on, the receipts that the town's receiving for short-term rental tax. And I think it's an easy case to make that these short-term rental properties and short-term rentals in general are driving the problems. And it's not just here, it's all over vacation areas. Iceland, apparently there's nowhere to live in Iceland anymore. So because of short-term rental situations. So I just, yeah, that's kind of what I think about
I
the
think
process.
the past year of real estate business, we can make a very compelling case for the
Mhm.
fact that our housing problem, which we all already thought was a crisis, is truly a crisis. And that using the numbers just from last year for, what the average sale price has gone up to, how many homes are being bought by second homeowners. I mean, there was that article in the Independent talking about how many of the homes on the Outer Cape are owned by second homeowners. I mean, that all feeds into the same thing. The second homeowners are renting the houses in the summertime, and that's what's taking away our housing stock.
I think right now with the CDP, Gary, we are working on putting together the needs, a statement about the needs.
I was going to say the same thing, Elaine, is that we have a contract with the CDP for technical support, and it's easy enough to request that they do a census of the surrounding towns about what they're doing with respect to the real estate, to the short-term rental tax. But you probably have this, Kathleen, but we get something called the Cape and Islands Association of Realtors report.
Mhm.
And so for year to date, I'll give you a couple of scary, that the sales are up 37% in Wellfleet, and that the average price, the median price, has gone from 550,000 to 617,000 in 1 year.
Mhm.
So it is what everyone is saying, is that there's less product on the market and it's much more expensive and therefore much less affordable.
Yep.
I can send this to everybody. This something we.
And there is that, from going back to that article, the Data Cape Cod site has got some stuff like, for example, this one here is median household income versus income needed to buy or rent.
Right.
Right.
So if you look at Wellfleet, if I've got this right, the cost of the housing way outstrips the income needed for it to be affordable. And I think if I recall correctly, you needed, in some cases, 4 people working in service industry incomes making enough money to afford rental housing for one family, which means it's basically impossible.
Not to
Which is
mention-
also a function of rising home prices and second homeowners, not just
Sure.
short-term rentals,
Yeah.
right? Because if you buy a house at these upper prices, even if you were wanting to be altruistic and rent it out year round, you couldn't rent it at a price that anyone who lives locally could afford,
Mhm.
because you would be subsidizing it because you wouldn't make your mortgage.
Yeah, because you look at this graph for Wellfleet, I think this is the median household income right here, this red line. And the blue is the and this is the $529,000 median sale price, the income you need to be able to buy that. So it's just completely out of reach.
Mhm.
Okay,
Double.
well, that's datacapecod.com, and they have stuff on all kinds of stuff. It's Cape Cod Commission data, I believe.
Do you
I
think,
don't think it's hard to make the case.
I was gonna say, maybe what we ought to do is say for next meeting that we'll put together a data-driven request. Michael, is there a time that's better or worse to make this appeal?
I mean, I would say that this is something that I would personally want to put on this warrant for this town meeting.
Mhm.
So, town meeting is tentatively set, for, I believe the date's June 6th.
Thought it was the 5th.
June 5th, is it?
I thought so, but
What day?
It's a Saturday.
That's the 5th.
The 5th, yeah, June 5th. I think it's 6 weeks we need to print the warrant, 5 or 6 weeks.
Yeah, it's about 5 or 6 weeks before town meeting that it's got to go to the printer.
So we certainly have time to do this before the next meeting. When are we gonna meet again? Any idea, Harry?
Oh, yeah.
Okay,
But if you work backwards from town meeting, that would mean by maybe late in April, this process should be complete.
Mhm.
'Cause that gives you 6 weeks until
Yeah.
early in June.
looking at that graph that you just showed me, it has made me really reconsider what I had said before. And I actually do think that, that we should attempt to allocate the full amount of the rental tax income to this trust. I mean,
Michael, I agree with that on one level, but on the other, in working with the planning board, for example, trying to get them to buy into ADUs, like a big sticking point is town water, for example.
yeah,
If
Mhm.
there's parts of town where we could be more, really more strategic in where the water goes, where there's some more developable land or whatever,
Mhm.
it is part of the problem, I guess is all I'm saying.
yeah. I'm
Right, but-
wondering, could we make a request that 100% of the short-term rental revenue would be allocated to housing and housing-related infrastructure, with 70% of the revenue being directed to the Affordable Housing Trust, or something like that.
Mhm.
That way, the 30% would be earmarked for housing infrastructure, 70% would go into the trust.
I think we might need to make a case on exactly what we would be doing with that money.
Yeah.
Would we be purchasing property and developing it, or buying homes that, right after they go on the market, before they get snatched up?
Could I make-
I think our sort of mission statement would direct that, right? So if it goes into the trust, it is for those specified purposes
Mhm.
that we've kind of already laid out, right?
Could I make one observation, Michael, that speaks to something that I know is close to your heart, which is these are funds that are not restricted to 100% or below of
Right.
median income. So this could really be for workforce housing. And this is probably the only money we have that's substantive in nature that could be used for that purpose.
True. True. And do we know if we can even, as this trust, spend money on workforce housing yet? Have we
We
heard
don't
about-
know that yet, but we're kind of working our way towards that.
Yeah,
You could ask for that money to set up a separate trust for workforce housing.
Mhm.
There's one other way that Orleans did this, and I'd be curious, Harry, as former town administrator, what you think. A couple of years ago, Orleans voted every year to put 8% of their budget into the housing trust. I think what their percent was like 1 or 1.5% or 2%. So they're putting like close to $300,000 in their trust every year. It's another way to ask the town to put money
Mhm.
in. I don't know if that looks like less of an earmark.
That would be 220,000 to do 1% in Wellfleet about, right?
Uh, I just wanted to throw that out there because that's something that Orleans did. They may also be going after the short-term rental tax, though. I don't know.
I
I
was
think you
gonna
want-
say,
Both.
I mean, my
Mm.
feeling is this ties to what the problem is. And I think most people will understand that. And that
Mhm.
this is extra money that the town hasn't had. Maybe, I would assume that we will get part of it at least. And then that will kind of die down. And maybe in a year or two, we then go back and say the town of Wellfleet should be budgeting money. I mean, a couple $100,000 a year is a drop in the bucket to what our problem is.
Mhm.
Exactly.
You know, you guys are trying to buy down properties with $175,000 and there aren't even any properties you can help the person to buy. I mean,
Mhm.
that whole program's gonna have to be restructured if the median price continues to go up. So I feel like we need to be bold and aggressive and that this money is ripe for our cause and we should focus on this first.
Mhm.
And after we get whatever we get of this, then we should look for other ways to get money.
Mhm.
Yeah, I wonder actually if what Gary, piggybacking on what Gary and Elaine brought up about it not being tied to affordability necessarily, and we know that this problem is not just an affordable housing problem, but a housing problem in general. If requesting that this funding go into a completely separate thing allows us to ask for different sources of funding for this trust for affordable housing the way we have been. And, you know, so if we were to make the request that that short-term rental income go into a fund for housing and housing infrastructure that's not tied to AMI, workforce housing,
Mhm.
then then there's less of an opportunity for the town to say, hey, you've got your allocation,
Mhm.
you know, because they're really two separate issues, because there's revenue for and grants for affordable housing, and there's very little funding that you can access to utilize in those other types of programs
Mhm.
to create workforce housing.
Yeah.
So it may make more sense to make a request to set up a separate trust for that. Not that it couldn't be used for affordable housing, but that it's specified.
Well, you
As
know,
housing.
workforce housing is kind of the redheaded stepchild in the sense that there aren't programs for it, but there is a need for it.
Yeah,
Well, I think ADUs, if we can get the ADU bylaw passed, then that's an opportunity for workforce housing and a place that we could put support behind.
right. And if there were funding to sort of help infrastructure upgrades or whatever,
Right.
or something like that, you know, it might facilitate more units.
Okay, so I guess one takeaway here is I need to sort of gently prod town council as to where they are on our bylaw and declaration of trust, both of which have workforce housing as a stated goal in them. In addition to the conversations I'm going to have later this week about with the Nantucket Housing Authority and the CDP about the issues.
Harry, we worked with MHP, the Mass Housing Partnership, the
Yep.
state quasi, and they have a person who's dedicated to the trust. And we could certainly, Elaine, I can't remember her name, but
Shelley Goring.
we could certainly put in a question about what are other people doing with respect to the trust and workforce housing, as well as the short-term rental tax, and see what we get back.
I think that Housing Nantucket is such an interesting organization. I know we don't have it and it is a nonprofit, but I think that's a big piece of their focus is
Mhm.
workforce.
Yeah, and they're independent of the town, so they're not subject to the same
Right,
restriction that we inherited with the statute.
right.
Can the trust have more than one trust accounts for different purposes?
Well, you can have two different trusts with the same board of trustees administering both trusts.
But you'd have to create another.
I think you'd have another entity and it might have to be if we can't fit this in the municipal framework, it would have to be a separate not-for-profit.
Could
At
it be
this point,
trust
we-
fund through the Community Housing Partnership or the Housing Authority?
No and no.
Okay,
I mean, Provincetown created a separate trust, their workforce housing trust. That's how they're financing Harbor Hill. So, we could find out from them what they did.
a town fund.
They
Well,
voted like a gazillion $1 million at town meeting. to set
they
up the
raised-
workforce Housing trust.
Right, they raised the AMI limit to 200%.
Yeah, and I think
Not sure.
Nantucket's either 175 or 200% also.
It
Well, I
has,
think this is a timely issue, and if we need to get it on the warrant, maybe we should target a meeting in a couple of weeks with the
Yep.
focus of putting this request together.
Okay, so let's think about maybe who needs to do what. I'm already have conversations scheduled with Andrea at CDP and also will chase down the Nantucket Housing Director and the person on the Nantucket Housing Trust to ask about that with them. But does somebody else want to talk to Mass Housing Partnership, or would you like for me to do that? What's the,
Elaine or I can do it. Elaine, you want to take that, or you want me to?
Sure. I mean, I'm happy to do it.
Yeah. that's
Whichever.
fine. And,
Mhm.
and I can check with CDP about, Harry, just as an FYI, we have a weekly meeting with CDP on which Andrea is a participant. And
I
that's at
see.
Wednesday at 10:15. So if you just want to join in, then that we could do it then as well.
Okay, good.
But either way, we'll ask CDP for
Yeah.
some census of what other towns are doing, how.
Yeah. And I'll be talking to her tomorrow morning. I have a 9:15 with her tomorrow morning.
Okay.
Okay. Any more on the short-term rental tax for now?
no,
Okay, the next item is further consideration of possible trust mission statement. I just put it on there to keep the discussion alive. Is that something we need to talk about today, or do we want to wait until the dust settles on some of this other stuff?
I
That's
think
right.
we need to hear from town council a little bit about what we can support in this trust before we can put together a formulated mission statement. But
Mhm.
that's my thoughts.
Okay. And I will gently bug town council.
Harry, did you submit a written questions to town council, or are you planning on talking to town council?
I submitted the memo that we did after the December 28th meeting, the same one that went to the selectmen for the selectmen's meeting.
Okay,
So they have that document. So, and I know who within town council's office it's been assigned to. It's Catherine Klein. Okay, so I have to follow up on that. Next meeting?
I think think since we're talking about something that we want to get on town meeting floor, maybe we
Yep.
should stick with the 2-week schedule and really devote it, look at this short-term rental tax and figure out what we need to say
Yeah, I'm,
and hammer that out.
excuse me, I'm certainly okay with that. That would be February 22 would be 2 weeks from today. I don't know how that works with Mike's schedule.
February 22nd. I'm in April, hold on. February 22nd. If we can do around the same time, that's good for me.
5:30?
I'm certainly okay with 5:30 if it works for everybody else.
Yeah, 5:30
Fine.
works for me.
Works for me.
Okay,
Sounds good.
And I think, Gary and I with CDP will talk about the needs statement. But whenever we do something, we're so in the weeds, it's great to put something out then for all of you to look at and translate it into something the general public.
yep.
Read.
Harry, are we going to approve the minutes? Because there was comment
Yes.
on the minutes.
Yes, that would be next.
Okay,
And let me see, let me get rid of that. Let me get rid of this, save this. I don't want to do it, save it. Oh, excuse me, cancel. I'll do that later. Let me get the minutes up. Does anybody need to see them?
Already read them, didn't we?
Yeah, they've been sent around. There haven't been any changes to them.
Sounds good to
Oh.
me.
So if they're okay the way they are, the question would be for approval of the minutes of the January 25th meeting.
So moved.
That was that Elaine or
Kathleen.
Sharon? Huh?
Kathleen,
Kathleen, I'm sorry.
it's okay.
Is there a second?
Second,
Second.
Harry, I
Okay.
do have a discussion point.
Okay, yep,
You ready?
yep,
I sent you all, in the minutes, we approved a request for a housing insertion in the spring tax bill.
yep,
And at the Housing Authority meeting last week, or this week, last week, we did approve a submission which has gone to the select board for approval on Tuesday's meeting. And I sent you the copy. It's called Housing Angels.
yep.
I don't think we got the copy, Gary. Did anybody actually?
I just sent it about a half an hour before the meeting.
I saw the
Okay.
message, but I didn't see any copy attached.
There wasn't anything. I apologize. Then I'll resend it.
Yeah, I saw that when I sat in on the Housing Authority meeting. So,
Hopefully we'll get all kinds of houses and land.
But anyway, it was
Yeah.
really Sharon and a group that did all the work on that. So thank you so much, Sharon.
mm-hmm.
Yeah, it was fun.
Anything else on the minutes?
nope.
Okay, well, we have a motion and a second to approve the January 25, 2021 minutes. And we will do a roll call. So, Mike,
Aye.
Elaine,
Aye.
Kathleen,
Aye.
Sharon,
Aye.
Jim,
Aye.
Gary.
Aye.
Chair votes aye, so that's 7, none opposed. And we have a meeting date, so I guess what's left is adjournment.
I second that.
Okay,
Oh,
so,
what about future meeting, schedule? Oh, do we have any
No, we-
topics that we were gonna bring up?
I don't have anything specific other than continuing the things that we haven't finished. But certainly if you email me anytime before the posting deadline, I'll add stuff. Or if there's something you want to talk about now that should go on there, we can do that too.
No, I'll just email you, I think.
Okay.
I'm not sure.
So my practice is that, whatever anybody wants to talk about is fine. I'm not somebody who tries to control what a committee does by controlling its agenda. Okay, so a motion to adjourn. I don't know who seconded that.
Sharon,
I did,
Sharon, okay.
ready for dinner.
Yep, yep, it's 7 o'clock almost. So again, roll call, Mike,
Aye.
Elaine,
Aye.
Kathleen,
aye.
Sharon,
Bye.
Jim,
Aye.
Gary,
Aye.
chair votes aye, and we are adjourned at 6:55 PM.
Thank you all.
Okay, we all
Thank
have
you
stuff
Thank
to
you
do.
very much.
Stay
Thank
healthy.
you.
Mary.
Thank you.
Bye.
Stop the recording.